In this video, we're going to learn the basics of creating realistic visual effects in the Fusion page of DaVinci Resolve 19. This is a full masterclass on everything that you need to know to get started to make really cool effects for your films. And by the end of this, you're going to have visual effects done for an entire short film. This is the kind of course that we've sold on our website for hundreds of dollars, and we've had hundreds of students who love our courses. But we're uploading this for free to YouTube because I want to see you make amazing stuff. And I know that if you watch this video and you have a good time and you want to learn a little bit more about Fusion, you'll want to dig a little bit deeper, at which point we have some more advanced courses available on our website. But we're pretty much designing this to be the most valuable VFX video for Fusion on YouTube. The very first thing that you got to do is download the media so that you can follow along. There's a link right there. There's also a link down in the description. Once you click that link and sign up, you're going to get an email with a link to a page like this. And here we have the unedited footage for this entire short film, as well as the audio and some sound effects. So you can download these and practice editing and syncing footage and all of that stuff. But this fourth link here is the VFX media, and that's what we're going to be working with today. The other thing that you should do is click this link, download Action VFX assets, and this will take you to our partner Action VFX. If you don't know them, they make all kinds of amazing visual effects assets, explosions, fire, water, gunshots, all of that stuff. And they made a special collection for us for this film that includes smoke and gun assets, muzzle flashes, and also a digital campfire. So we're going to be taking these elements and mixing them with the footage that you downloaded. These guys are just so cool. So yeah, grab your Action VFX assets and make sure to download the VFX media, and you'll be set to follow along.
Tell you what, Troy, I don't think I'll ever forget that as long as I live.
Boy, I haven't seen a man wet himself so fast at the sight of a pistol.
How much you think we got there?
I'd say we got at least 10 grand in there, Elliot. Tell you what, my friend, this is gonna change our lives for the better.
What I heard from that last town, 10 grand should be more than enough to change our lives. But, little birdie told me that you was looking to pay off quite the debt.
Well, now, Elliot, you know how rumors is. They ain't always true.
Well, this one seems quite certain.
Seems to me the only thing that's certain is that one of us is gonna be walking away with that money. The other one is gonna be feeding them coyotes.
I trusted you, Troy.
You had every right to. But trust don't repay blood money to Johnny Lark and the Silver Gang.
Johnny Lark and the Silver Gang ain't your problem, Mr. Fletcher. I am.
So I see.
All right, here we are in DaVinci Resolve 19, and I just have a new project open. The first thing I'm going to do is import our media. So I'm going to right click in the media pool, say import media. And after you download and unzip the media, there's one called DC VFX media, and that's the one we're going to be working with today. There's a folder called for VFX, and it has a bunch of video files in there. I'm just going to select all of those and hit open. That's going to bring those into my media pool. I'm also going to right click and import this double crossed full mix. I'm also going to import our videos from Action VFX. I'm just going to make a new bin here. We'll call this Action VFX. And let's put those in there like this. Beautiful. So now we're all set up. We have everything that we need. And now to get the film actually set up, let's make sure that we sort the media pool by name. So starting with V1001 and ending in V135. I'm going to click the first one, shift select the last one, right click on the first one and say create new timeline using selected clips. And we'll just call this edit and hit create. And that's going to throw all of the clips into my timeline in order. And it's going to be just like the edit that we have for our actual movie. And then I'm going to take the double crossed full mix and drag this down to audio 1. And now we should have the entire movie.
Seems to me the only thing that's certain is that one of us is going to be walking away with that money.
Great. A couple other things I want to do to set up our project is in the lower right-hand corner, let's click on the gear here. That's going to bring up our project settings. And the one thing I'm going to do is under master settings for our timeline resolution, here where it says 1080, we're going to change this to 800. 800. That's just going to kind of crop this to the widescreen. Let's save. And now we have just the widescreen video here without the black bars. If you render it to a 16:9, it'll still have black bars, but it doesn't have to think about those black bars. And you can actually render this out as a widescreen and put it up on YouTube or whatever you want. And it will actually kind of play back and have the wider player and things like that. The other thing I want to do is set up our color management. You'll notice all of this footage is this kind of gray desaturated look. This is log footage shot on the Blackmagic Cinema Camera 6K. And so what we need to do is go down to the lower right and click on the project settings. And here, this third one down, color management, we're going to go to where it says Color Science DaVinci YRGB. I'm going to take this and switch it to YRGB color managed, just like this. I'm going to uncheck automatic color management, take this color processing mode, and I'm going to switch it to HDR DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate, just like this. And then I'm going to go down and hit save. So really simple. That's all you have to do is just copy these settings and your color management is set up in your project. Now, nothing looks any different because we haven't tagged the color space. So I'm going to go up here to my media pool and again, shift select all of these, right click on any of them, and then go to input color space. This input color space, we're going to go to Blackmagic Design, Film Gen 5. And now when I do that, oh baby, everything looks a lot better. So what we've done is we've just brought in our footage, we've laid it out on the timeline, and we've set up our color management so that we're not looking at the log footage when we edit and when we color and when we work in Fusion. We're looking at the footage with the colors kind of set to neutral, set to normal. So it doesn't necessarily look good, but it does look very close to how it was intended to look when we shot it. So we haven't done any kind of creative grade or anything like this. This is just the transform. And this is actually a great place to start with visual effects. If you do know the look that you're going for, you can work under that if you want to by using a LUT and everything. But this is kind of the most basic, easy version to use. And this is pretty much what I do anytime that I'm doing visual effects, is I make sure that I have my color management set up here so that when I go into Fusion, like this, I'll just switch into Fusion. We're seeing the footage with kind of a preview of how it's going to look like when we actually put our color grade on it. Just for clarity, the way this image looks, this isn't actually the starting image that we're feeding Fusion. The starting image is actually that log footage, and it's actually being transformed to look like this. So this is footage that's in a linear gamma. What does that mean? Well, basically what that means is if something is twice as bright as something else in real life, it's actually twice as bright as far as the pixels go. Because there is a huge range of brightnesses, it's not going to look right on the screen. Your screen can only display kind of a small slice of all of the brightnesses that are available in the world. And so there's going to be things that are too dark to actually look good on the screen and too bright to actually look good on the screen. And that's when an image is in a linear gamma. And that's totally okay because this is not how we're actually going to look at our image. It's sort of like we're unpacking all of the data and we're saying, this is how bright this is and this is how bright this is. Now do with it what you want. And Fusion's going to do all of the magic things that Fusion does, and at the end, it's going to convert it back to something that actually looks good. If that's a little bit deep for you to start out with, don't worry about it. If you turn on color management, you're going to be looking at a piece of footage that looks like this, and you'll be able to do all of the VFX and stuff in Fusion looking at this image, and it's going to be in the highest quality possible, as long as your settings for your color management look like this on the project level. Okay? So we have all of our footage in here. We have our project management set up. At this point, you could watch through the movie and it should work and be pretty entertaining, but we're going to be missing a few pretty important visual effects. One of them, probably the most obvious one, would be the gunshots. No, we didn't actually use real guns. That would be much too dangerous. In fact, we didn't even use a real fire. All we have are these lights that are kind of set to this fire flicker mode, and that gives a little bit of lighting to the rocks as well as the underside of our people. Little kicker here on his fingers. And so this is kind of the first big concept here is when you are doing visual effects for your movie, you really want to get your edit locked in first, because there might be shots that need a lot of visual effects work that you're actually going to cut from the story. I'll go ahead and close our media pool here. So we have all of our edit completely done and as close as we can possibly get it to being a finished thing. Here for this project, we actually have the finished sound, we have the finished edit and everything, just like the film that we actually made. But for your project, you might want to have your sound most of the way roughed in, your edit, 95% there. You're pretty sure that you're not going to cut out any other shots, and that would be a good time to kind of jump into Fusion. I would also probably do Fusion before color most of the time. It's not that big a deal. You can kind of go back and forth and fix things, but we generally do Fusion before color. Once you have your edit all done, everything is ready for visual effects. One of the first things that we need to do is figure out what visual effects we need to put in. And so what I like to do is just go through and add markers here. So here we need gunshots. And so I'll just hit M on the keyboard and then hit it one more time to open up this marker. And so we'll just say VFX gunshots. And we'll also need fire and smoke. So gunshots, fire, and smoke. That's what we need on this clip. I can hold down Alt and drag this marker, and that's going to give me a duration marker. So that's going to let me kind of just select this little part and say, all right, this is where we have VFX that we need to add. And we're also going to need the fire and smoke on this end shot. So I'll go ahead and add a marker. We'll say VFX, fire, /smoke. And again, add a duration here, holding Alt and just dragging this out. That's going to be for this whole clip. So these are really going to be our major clips that we're doing a lot of visual effects on. There are some other things that we need to do, and most of it is actually adding smoke, because if these guys are at this fire and there's smoke kind of billowing out here, fire, smoke, right? Then these close-up shots, we should actually see some smoke here too. So there should be smoke in these shots, as well as this shot. There should be some smoke. And pretty much anything that, if we're going to shoot through the smoke, like probably not these close-ups, we probably don't need smoke for those, but anything where we would see smoke coming up from the fire, this is where we need to add some smoke. Now, we're going to go ahead and do that last, because even though there are a lot of shots that we need to add smoke to, we're going to do a really cool trick to add the smoke to a bunch of shots all at once without having to bring them all into Fusion and do a big composite. That's going to be a little shortcut that I think is going to be really helpful. But we have our two main shots here, and let's just go ahead and start with those. I think what I'm going to do is actually start with this end shot, just because there's less to do on it. And what we need to do is worry about this fire and the smoke. So to bring a shot into Fusion, all I have to do is be over it here in the edit page with my playhead, and then switch over to Fusion. That's going to bring this clip into Fusion, and we're going to be able to adjust it And anything that we do here in Fusion is going to appear on the timeline. And so if I were to, let's just color correct this blue, I could switch this over to the edit and we have a blue clip on the timeline. And it only affects this one clip. It's just the clip we're over. Really, really easy. So this is why I love doing visual effects in Resolve, is because you don't have to render it out. You don't have to go to a different program. It's just really simple to open up a shot, play with it, and then you just close the shot and it's already in the timeline. You don't have to render it. Oh, so fun, so good. But now that we're in Fusion, we're going to take quite a bit of time to play around here. So I'm going to go up to Workspace and uncheck Show Page Navigation. That's just going to hide that bar that was down here and give us a little bit more room for our nodes, because that's probably the biggest thing with Fusion, is getting enough room for your nodes. And let's talk about how this is going to work here. If you're completely new to nodes, I would really recommend just pausing here and checking out this video. This explains how nodes work with Toast. And I think it's really helpful if you've never really used nodes, if you're not familiar with how that works. It's a great kind of first step. So I'm going to assume that you at least kind of understand that nodes are a flowchart and that you link them together to make your different effects. Each node has one job. The media in's job is to bring this footage in from the timeline. The media out's job is to render this footage out to the timeline. And then everything that we do to the clip happens in between these two nodes. So if we wanted to blur this, we could take this blur, drag this down in between these two nodes, and as long as it's connected, we can push that blur size up and we have a blurry image. Now, I'm going to go ahead and go up to Workspace and reset my UI layout. And go ahead and hide my page navigation again, just so that we're all kind of starting with the same place and we don't have panels moving around or anything like that. And let's just have a little refresher on the interface here. So here we have a viewer where we can actually see the footage. We have this little timeline down here where we can scrub through it, but this is actually one of two viewers. If you go up here to this little button and click on that, that's going to open two viewers. And we can view the result of any node by just dragging it to a viewer or hitting 1 or 2 on the keyboard. So for instance, if I do my little blue color correction here, this image looks blue because I'm viewing the media out here on my right viewer. I can tell because there's these two little dots and that right dot is white. And so that's showing me that it's in the right viewer. I could also load it in the left viewer by hitting the black dot and turning it white. Or I could hit 1 on the keyboard to turn that off and on. Or I can drag it in like this. What we're doing is we're viewing what this media out node is doing in both of these viewers. But I can put different nodes in different viewers. So I could put this media in node in this first viewer, and we see just what the media in is doing. It's bringing in this footage, and the result of the media in looks like this. Same thing for color corrector. The result of the color corrector looks like this. And nothing's really happening between the color corrector and the media out, so those look exactly the same. But if I were to do something like put a blur in here, I can make this blurry. And now we have the media out blurry, the color corrector, just the color corrector, and the media in, just the media in. So this is great because we're going to be using this a lot to view what different nodes are doing at different times. What I like to do most of the time is keep media out in this second viewer because it feels kind of like the edit page where we have the timeline viewer on the right and the source viewer on the left. The source viewer looking at media that isn't necessarily in your timeline. It won't necessarily be viewed as the final result. But then on the right, we have our final result, what our audience is actually going to see. So we're going to kind of keep it that way, but that's why we have two viewers. And it looks like I switched shots somehow. So I'll go back and show my page navigation, go back to edit. Let's switch back to this end shot and hit Fusion again. There we go. And I'll just bring this back to one viewer for now. And we're going to learn more basics of Fusion, but we're going to kind of do this as we go. Let's start out with figuring out what the heck we want to do. All the things that we need to do to this image. One is we're going to need to add a fire. Okay, so we'll need some way to show the fire. We'll need some kind of fire element. So here's our to-do list. One is fire. Next, we'll need to have smoke from the fire. And actually something I didn't go over earlier is there is a white van here in the background. And would you be able to tell? Would you probably notice? Maybe not. But we're going to go ahead and remove this van because I don't want that to throw anybody off. So we got to remove the van. In fact, let's go ahead and make a note here in our nodes. If you go up to the effects and then search note, that'll bring up a tool called sticky note. You can grab this and drag this down like this. And this just makes a little sticky note for you here in the nodes. I'll double click on that. And we're going to make a little to-do list. So 1, we need fire. 2, we need smoke. And 3, we need to remove van. Is there anything else we need to do? I don't think so. So that's our little to-do list. And we'll just go ahead and put this over to the right. One thing I'll do is I'm going to get rid of this little preview thing. All you have to do is click down here in the nodes and hit V. V as in Victor. And that's going to get rid of that little navigator thing. Go ahead and close our panels here. So the first thing we got to do is put in a fire. So there are a lot of ways that you could make a fire with visual effects. One way would be to generate a fire using particles or render a fire in 3D. But probably the easiest way is to take footage that somebody's shot of a fire and then just kind of put it over the footage. And then if you do it right, it'll look like the fire is actually in this footage. In our media pool, on the left, under Action VFX, we have a few different elements here. If you've never used visual effects elements, a lot of them are shot on black, and we'll go over why in just a minute. But for now, let's go ahead and take this small fire. I'm going to drag this down to our nodes. It's called Media In 2, so I'm going to rename that. I'll hit F2 on the keyboard to rename it, and we'll just call this Fire_MI for Media In. You always want to name your nodes in a way that tells you not only what it is, but what kind of node it is. Because if I just call it fire, it's just fire node. But just by looking at the name, you wouldn't know if it's a piece of footage called fire or if it's a color correction that you're only applying to the fire. So I always just say fire media in like this, fire MI. And okay, this media in one, let's say OG.MI, OG.MI for original media in. Okay. I'll close our media pool and open up our 2 viewers here. And let's take this media in, this fire, and drag this to the left. And now we can see what this actually is. I'll just play this back. And we see there's this campfire. This actually is already keyed, which is really nice. By that, I mean that they've removed the black background. So that's going to be a little bit easier for us to position this and everything. But the big idea here is we're going to take this fire and we're going to put it over these lights, and it will look like there's a fire there. So the way that you put something over something else in Fusion is you have to use a merge node. So a merge node is this icon right here. You can grab this and then drag this in between my original footage and my media out. And we'll just make sure that it highlights blue when I drop it here. You can take it and kind of wiggle it around and make sure that this is actually connected. Because sometimes you can set something right here on this connection and it looks like it's connected, but it's not. So if you see people in tutorials or see me grabbing something and wiggling it, that's why. So let's go ahead and take this fire, and I'm going to take the output of the fire. So anytime that you grab this little gray square and you move it, you're plugging the image that this node makes into an input of another node. So let's plug this into the green input of the merge node like this. So now we have the fire going into the green input of the merge and the OG going into the yellow input of the merge. This is really important, these colors. A lot of people miss this. Because look at what we're doing here. We have our original footage, and then we have the fire over it, so we can see the fire. If I were going to hook this up to different colors, if I were to take the fire and plug that into the yellow, and the original footage and plug it into the green, it looks almost the same here with the nodes, but look, we don't see any fire. That's because if we take this footage and we move it over, we'll see that the fire is actually underneath this footage. So we don't want that. We always want to make sure that the background is connected to the yellow and the foreground is connected to the green. The yellow is always the background input for a merge and the green is always the foreground. You can quickly swap these just by selecting merge and hitting Control-T. That's going to swap those so that now you have the foreground in the foreground and the background in the background. You'll notice that you can grab this foreground and move it around if you have the merge selected. So if I want to adjust the position of this or the rotation, I can grab this little circle and kind of move it. I can grab the edges and scale this if I want to. And you'll notice as I do that, here in the inspector, these little controls are moving. So look at this size control as I scale this. As I'm scaling it up and down here on my screen, it's moving it here in the inspector. That's because this inspector, it works pretty much just like the inspector works on the edit page, in that when you have something selected, you adjust its properties here in the inspector. And so I'll go ahead and just double click on any of these properties to reset them. You can also go up here to the upper right and click this little circle arrow button, and that'll reset everything. And now all I'm doing is just putting the foreground over the background. That's all this merge is doing. But I do want to adjust the position and the size and everything of this fire. But instead of doing it in the merge like I was doing, I'm going to do it in a separate node. Now, why is that? Well, one of the advantages of working with nodes is that you can see a flowchart of everything that's happening to your image. And right now, if I look at this flowchart, this looks exactly the same as this, but the image is different. And so what I'm going to do is just set myself up for success later. I'm going to give myself a clue that I'm scaling this or moving it around by adding a transform node right here between the fire and the merge. So this third section here, the very right icon, if I grab this and drag this in between the fire and the merge, and when this little connection turns blue, I can let go, that's going to make a transform node. So a transform node is basically just these controls from the merge, but it's put into a separate node. So now I can move this around and size it and everything just like I would with the merge, but it's broken out into a separate node. So let's select this transform node, and I'm going to take the size and push that down a little bit. And I'm just going to kind of throw this over the rocks for now. Now, does this look good? Not really. But we can play this back and see how it looks. We get the idea. We get what we're kind of going for here. And it's kind of roughed in. In fact, this is actually a great way to just kind of rough something in real quick. And remember, you can always just go back to your edit page and you can see how it feels with the fire in it, right? So especially if you want to share this with somebody and you want them to have kind of a basic idea of what the effects are going to look like, you can kind of throw something in like this just so they have an idea that there's going to be a fire there at some point. And you'll go back and refine it and make it look nicer later. But right now it's like, imagine a fire. This is what we would call a slap comp. So it's basically taking the raw ingredients and kind of putting them roughly together to kind of rough it out. And it's always good to kind of start with something like this. Do the big obvious things first, because that's going to help you make decisions and find problems later before you spend a really long time refining exactly how this fire looks. You can kind of look at the image as a whole. So I would highly recommend doing a slap comp for anything that you're doing in Fusion. But right now we've kind of roughed in the fire. The other thing let's do is rough in our smoke, and we're going to do it almost the exact same way. I'm going to go up to the media pool, grab this small rising smoke, drag this in. Let's take a look at this on our bigger screen here. And this actually was shot on black. And so we're going to have to remove the black here, which is actually really, really easy. But let's go ahead and rename this media in. We'll just call it smoke MI. And this time, I'm going to do a little shortcut. Instead of adding a merge node, I'm just going to grab this little gray square, the output, and I'm going to drag it over the output of my merge one like this. That's going to add this merge node, add what I dragged this over as the background, and what I was dragging as the foreground. So now we have the smoke on black on top of everything else. Now, we don't want the smoke on black. So what we can do is use a different apply mode. So in the merge that we're using to put our smoke over it, I can select this merge and go over to the inspector. And this right here is what we're looking for, the apply mode. This apply mode, we're going to set this to screen. That's just the first one down, and look what happens. Oh, baby. It takes away all the black. So this is a great way to add things like smoke, fire if it's on black, sparks, that kind of thing. Screen I find is especially good for something that isn't emitting light. For fire and sparks, sometimes you would want to do an apply mode called add, although they don't have the apply mode add here. What you would actually do is switch this to normal and then take this alpha gain and push that all the way down. That would give you a similar result with the smoke, but with the fire, it's actually going to make it kind of light up a little bit. In fact, let's go ahead and try this with the fire. Here for merge 1, this is the merge that controls how our fire goes over it. I can take this alpha gain and turn it down, and look what happens to our fire. It kind of gets brighter. What that does is that takes the brightest pixels and it kind of brightens things with the pixels. It doesn't just take away the black, it actually adds brightness to things. So that's good when things are emitting light, right? So we're going to go ahead and do that with the fire, but with the smoke, let's not do the alpha gain, let's just do a screen. And that's just going to take away the black and put the smoke there. That's why these VFX assets are shot on black, because it's really easy to add them just with a screen. So again, we're going to kind of rough in this smoke. And again, we're going to use the transform. So smoke media in, I'll select that. And this time I can just hit this transform button right here, boop, and that'll add a transform node. Okay. I can take this, maybe I'll scale it up and I'll just kind of put this towards the middle and I'll move it up like this for now. Again, we're going to make this look better, but for now we have fire and smoke happening. And now we have an idea of what's actually going to be in the shot. Okay. That's looking pretty good. We'll take out the van in a little bit, but let's go ahead and refine how this fire and smoke look. I'm just going to go ahead and turn off this merge 2. I'm going to select the merge 2 and then this little switch right here. If you switch that, that's just going to turn off everything that the merge is doing, which is putting the image that comes from the smoke and the transform over this background. So I'm going to turn it off just so we can focus on the fire first. And I'm going to zoom in here. And let's just take a look at this fire and be a little bit more picky. Let's play this back. One thing is it feels like this fire is maybe just a little bit slow motion. So this might have been shot with kind of a high frame rate. That's sort of what it looks like. And so what I think I'll do is speed up this fire. Now you can decide whether to do this or not, if you feel like that fire is the right speed or not. But I'm going to take this fire and I'm going to speed it up using a node called time speed. Now, time speed is not in this bar. You would have to go to effects and search for it like this. You can just type time and that brings up time speed right here. But instead of going all the way up here to the effects, I'm just going to close the effects. I'm going to use a little shortcut. I'm going to hold shift on my keyboard and hit spacebar. That'll bring up this select tool window and it'll put my cursor right here and I can type anything that I want. So I'm going to type time and that's going to bring up my time speed node. Now, when I hit add, because I have this fire media in selected, it's going to add it right after that and it's going to connect it. So that's a major time saver. Anytime you know what node you want to add, you just hit shift spacebar, type in what you want. You can hit up or down to select the different nodes that it brings up and then just hit enter and it will add that. So quick. Such a good time saver. And when you get used to it, you can just be like, ooh, I want to add time speed. There we go. And it's a lot quicker. So now this time speed, let's take this and let's take the speed and let's just make this 2. I'm also going to take this interpolation mode and say nearest, just because it has to do a little less work that way. And let's look at this now. So now we have that fire. And that fire looks a little bit more wild. And I think I like that. I think that looks a little more realistic. They aren't going to be sitting next to a slow motion fire, and that's going to work just fine. Now, depending on how long your element is and what you want for your timing in Fusion, you might want to use kind of a later part or an earlier part of the fire. And here's how you do that in Fusion. In the upper right-hand corner, we have this button called keyframes. And when we click that, that's going to open up our keyframes panel. And that's going to look something like this. It's going to have all these little timelines here. And whatever media you have imported into your nodes, it'll show the timing of it here in the keyframes panel. And so if I want to use maybe a later part of this clip, I can grab the middle of this and just kind of move it down like this. And that would work. Of course, I'm using time speed, so I can only use the first half of it. But sure, I'll move this down a little bit. It doesn't really matter for this. But that's how you would kind of move things back and forth in time, is you kind of grab them and move them back and forth in the keyframes panel. So, you know, if you have an explosion and you want it to start at a certain time, that's how you would kind of move it around. I'll go ahead and close the keyframes because it's not that important for us right now. Let's make sure everything looks good. Yep. And so we have our fire being played back at a decent speed that makes any sense at all. And now let's think about the sizing of this fire. My guess is this is a little big. I mean, I'm all for exciting things, but it's maybe a little big. So what we could do is we could scale it down. We could take this transform, scale it down some more. We could also just take it and kind of move it down a little bit like this. And so now that we have this moved down, we're going to kind of ignore the bottom part of this. In fact, I'll just grab this and kind of just move it up like this off screen so we don't see the bottom part yet, because we'll fix that in a little bit. But now we can see kind of just how big this fire is. And it's, it's about too big. So I'm thinking that we could probably still scale this down. Let's scale it down just a little. Take the size down and take this down. I just want it to kind of be kind of a low little fire. Yeah, something like that. That looks pretty good. That's going to be a lot better for what we want. And we don't have an out of control raging fire. Something like that. So we have kind of the general size. Now we have this problem where the fire is kind of coming from off screen and it's obviously an overlay. Like, this does not look real at all. And that's because it hasn't been integrated into the footage. If I turn off this merge, we can see we have these rocks, and where the fire is in 3D space is actually kind of behind this little log. It's where the lights are, right? And so what we really want to do is put that fire exactly where those lights are. So I'm going to turn on this merge, and we aren't going to see any of the fire under the lights, like lower on the screen than the lights. And so how do we kind of cut this out where we only see the top part of the fire? In Fusion, the best way to do that is with a mask. So a mask is a shape that you draw on the screen, and those live right here. And you can grab something like this circle and bring this down. This makes an ellipse mask. And I'll just drag this to the left. And here we can see what this mask is doing. We can make a shape on the screen, and that's going to create an image that's black and white. And then we can use this image to define where any node ever gets to do its job. So I could take this mask and I could apply this mask to my OGMI, to my original footage, by grabbing the output of it and plugging it into the blue input. The blue input of any node is the mask input. So look what happens when I do this. Now, this media in node is only bringing in our footage and drawing it to the screen within this circle. If I move the circle around, it's only going to do it wherever that circle is. So this is a great way to kind of limit things. I could take this ellipse, and let's just look at our fire here. I could take this ellipse and plug it into the fire and move this around and cut off the bottom. And that's pretty much what we want, right? But, and this is really important, we need to think about the order of operations on what we're doing here, because Fusion only does what you tell it to do. Right now, what we're doing is we're taking this fire and we're bringing it in from the media pool, and we're saying, okay, open this fire footage, bring it into Fusion. And it says, okay. And then we're speeding it up and we're making it smaller, and then we're putting it over our background. So now we have to ask ourselves, at what point do we want to cut this fire out? Do we want to cut it out in the media in? So we're basically saying, I want you to bring in this fire footage, but I only want you to draw it right here inside of this circle. Or once you bring in the fire footage and you speed it up and then you make it smaller, I only want you to make it smaller inside of the circle, which that's not really what we want. It might actually be easier this time to take this ellipse and put it into the merge, because what we're saying is, okay, take this fire, speed it up, make it smaller, and then only put it over this footage inside of the circle. So now we can control where this fire is by putting a mask on our merge. And this is how I would recommend doing things that are going to interact with the background. I would really try and do the mask on the merge most of the time. If it's something where you know you're never going to use a different part of the footage and it doesn't have to be, perfectly cut around rocks and stuff like we're about to do, then it probably doesn't matter. You could put it on the fire if you want to. But here, we're going to limit this to a really specific kind of shape around these rocks and everything. And so what we really want to do is draw this mask while we're looking at these rocks so that we can get an exact cutout that's kind of stuck to the background, and we can move the foreground, this fire, kind of wherever we want, and we won't have to recut it out or something like that. I'll show you a little bit more about what I mean here. Let's go ahead and get rid of this ellipse. I'm going to grab this third icon here. This is our polygon mask. And what polygon mask lets us do is draw a custom shape with the pen tool and use it as a mask. I'm going to connect this to my merge and make sure that I'm looking at my merge here in the viewer. And then I'm going to be really careful in tracing out these rocks. Basically anything that would go in front of the fire, that's what I want to trace out right now. So I'm going to go ahead and just maybe start over here, and I'm just going to kind of click and drag around these rocks and this piece of wood like this. Maybe this rock. And once I get far enough away from the fire, I can just kind of fill in the rest of this. So now we have a shape that kind of defines the edge of those rocks. But as we apply this to the merge, what we're telling it to do is only merge this fire over within this mask. So it's literally the opposite of what we want to happen. So instead of that, we're going to take this polygon mask, and I'm going to go over here to the inspector, and I'm going to click invert. Invert is going to make the outside of this shape white and the inside black instead of the inside white and the outside black. And white is where you're telling that node to do its thing. So let's select the outside of this, and then in merge one, now we have this kind of cutout here to where we only see the fire on the outside of this little mask. I'll go ahead and select this polygon, and one thing I'll do is add a little bit of a soft edge to this, because if you kind of notice, things aren't perfectly sharp here. Because of the resolution and just because of lenses and everything, it's not totally sharp. And so we don't want this edge totally sharp because that's a dead giveaway. We want to push up the soft edge here. So I'm just going to grab the soft edge and just push it up a little bit to where we have a nice softened edge here. It's not hard like that. Nice and soft. Let's take this merge and take a look at what it's doing and kind of back out. And now this is starting to look a little bit more legit. Like we only have the fire appearing where the fire would be. So we're kind of integrating it into that 3D space, into that world. And that's the key to making things look really good. It's making sure that they're behind the things that they should be behind and in front of the things that they should be in front of. So let's go ahead and look at the media out and see how this fire is looking. Let's play this back. And honestly, it looks pretty good. It definitely looks like the fire's here in this fireplace, other than when it kind of goes in front of that rock. We see it kind of like creeping over there. And so we're going to adjust our mask a little bit. I can take this polygon, and I'm just going to go back to where I was. That was on frame 90, and make sure everything's good. It looks like everything's pretty good here. So as we play this back, we'll notice that it looks pretty good on some frames. Like at the beginning it looks all right, but then as it kind of moves, look what happens. We have this shape that's kind of misaligned with everything that's happening here in the foreground. So that's a problem because we can't just trace out that shape once because it's just not going to work. It's going to be a dead giveaway. We have this little edge that's kind of moving, doesn't look good. So what do we do? Well, we have a couple of options. Anytime that you need your mask to stick to something or to move or to change to be the right shape over time, you can either animate the mask or you can track or stabilize the footage. Sometimes it's a matter of doing both at the same time. Let's take a look at what I mean here. One thing that we could do is here on this frame, frame 90, everything looks good. We could go to the end of this shot and we could grab all of our points like this, and we could move this around to be exactly where it's supposed to be. So I could kind of move these points back and then adjust everything to be right on the edge again and make it look a little better. And if you think, wow, that sounds like a lot of work, you're right. It is a lot of work. Generally, we try and avoid doing this because it takes forever and it's really hard to make look good. Why is it so hard to make look good? Well, here we have 2 keyframes, and this polygon is going to animate in between those 2, which seems like what we want. But what actually happens is that the footage doesn't move perfectly like our animation does. Sometimes it moves faster, sometimes it moves slower. And so we still have our shape kind of being misaligned in the middle here. And so again, we can go through and we can adjust it, right? Let's say that that's perfect, but then it's going to be misaligned again. And so we'd have to go through and eventually just about trace every single frame, which is not great. That takes a lot of work. Sometimes you have to do this. But what is much, much easier and much better, if you can get away with it, is just to track the motion and kind of stick your mask to move along with the footage. So let's go ahead and just reset our polygon. I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of that. And we're just going to take a little step back here, and we're going to take a look at our footage. This is actually something that's good to do at the beginning of a shot, before you really start working, or before you start getting detailed anyway, is take a look at the footage and see, does it move? Is it completely locked down on sticks, or is it dollying in or out, or left or right? Is there any kind of camera movement that we'll have to deal with when we're doing visual effects? And so this one, it's on a slider, and it's also a little bit shaky. So it's kind of on a shaky slider. So this footage is definitely moving, which means that anything that we want to put into the footage to make look realistic also has to move at the same speed at the same time and pretty much have the exact same motion so that it looks like it's actually there. So let's go ahead and I'm just going to bring the original media over here to the left a little bit so we have a little bit of room. And I'm going to hit Shift Spacebar and type TRACK. That's going to bring up our tracker. And I'll hit Add. Let's go ahead and put this tracker here in the left viewer. And if I zoom out a little bit, we'll see that we have this little square. So this square, this is where we're picking a place on the screen for Fusion to track and kind of stick things to. So you generally want to pick the object in your shot that's closest to whatever you're trying to stick things to. So for us, we're replacing this fire. And so I want to track these lights that are here in the fireplace. And what's great about this is that this tracker is looking for a really high contrast area. That's kind of what it's looking for, is a shape or kind of the difference in pixels, a little pattern of pixels that has high contrast that it can grab onto and recognize every single frame. And so with this tracker, I can put this on the edge, let's say just right there, of our light. And then I can say, I want you to stick this little crosshair right there every single frame. And once I've picked the little place I want this to be, I can go over to the inspector with my tracker selected. And I can click on this track forward and reverse button right here. And look what happens. It goes through and it finds all of the movement throughout the entire shot. And it figures out how it moves. This is magical. This is just wonderful. So what that's doing is that's going to move things exactly how they're moving in real life. And anything that we attach to this tracker is going to move the same way and look like it is there in real life, which is perfect for VFX, right? So we have this tracked. How do we use the tracking data? There are a few different ways to do it. The easiest one would be to take this tracker and basically turn it into a merge node. So I can select this tracker, go up to Operation. That's the second tab here. And here under Operation, we have none, but let's switch this to Match Move. Match Move, what that will do is basically turn this into a merge node, which we can use instead of our merge node. So I'll go ahead and move these over here and take this green input and just plug it into the green input of the tracker like that. And now check this out. We messed up our mask and everything, but look how this fire moves. It moves along with our footage. It's a little bit hard to tell with it off screen like this, but let's just kind of take a look at this. It has those little micro jitters and everything, and it looks like it's really stuck to those rocks. So this is going to be great for our fire as well as our mask. So let's go ahead and undo that movement. Okay, we have our fire roughly where it's supposed to be. I am going to set our tracker apply mode to linear dodge, which is actually a lot like add and kind of taking that alpha gain down. And so now we have our fire in the right place, but we got to work on our mask. So now we have the fire moving along with our footage, but we need to apply the actual mask to this. Now, if I were to take this polygon mask and plug this into the tracker, you might think that if I were to do a nice little trace of my shapes here, whatever I want to do, you might think that that would work out just fine. Let's go ahead and invert this mask because I have it plugged into the tracker, right? And the tracker kind of makes everything move around, but it doesn't actually move the mask. It only moves the foreground. So we still have to kind of deal with this. The good news is we've already done all the hard parts. All we have to do is go to our polygon mask, and then here where it says center, I'm gonna do something crazy. I'm gonna right click on center, and here I have this menu of all these fancy things I can do. And I'm gonna select connect to, and we have tracker 1 and teletrack 1 path. That's the movement that our tracker made. And so I can connect this to this path position like this. And now it's going to apply those keyframes and everything that we just made with our tracker to our mask. Now it's going to move it kind of down off screen. So we're going to have to select it and kind of reposition it, but it's not going to be that much work to do so. We're just going to put this back where it's supposed to be. Just kind of offset it a little bit. There we go. And now look at this. Look at this magic. Oh, baby, it goes along with it. Ugh. All right. Is it totally perfect? Not really. Is it probably good enough? Probably. So we're going to go ahead and call that good enough. You can take some more time on it if you want, but that's kind of the idea. If we do want to refine that a little bit, we could start at the beginning and kind of grab all these and move them just where they're supposed to be, go to the end. And again, this is animated by default. So any movement that we do to this shape on a different frame is going to animate along. So that makes it a little bit nicer. But you can easily kind of get in trouble doing this because every time that you are at a different point in time with your mask and you move things around, it adds a keyframe. So if I want to do something like, for instance, not include this bright white light back there, and I want to take this and kind of move this back like this, well, then it's only going to happen for that frame, and then it's going to animate and put it back. And it's just, it's so miserable. And so what I like to do most of the time, unless I really need to animate this shape, is I like to find a frame where it's really close, and then go over here to right click for shape animation, right click on it, and say remove polygon 1 polyline. What that does is that removes all of the animation for the actual shape. And so now it's the same shape throughout, and there's no keyframes on it. And so at any point, if I see something that needs to be changed like this, I can kind of move this around and it's not going to animate it. Just like that. Looks good to me. So again, let's make sure that our shape is soft. Not too soft, just a little bit soft like that. And I'm also going to make sure that our tracker, that we set our apply mode from normal. We could use linear dodge, actually. Linear dodge would work. It's going to do a very similar thing to what we were doing with our alpha gain, pushing that down here. But linear dodge is going to make it so it's kind of lighting up a little bit. And now we have our fire, looking so much better. At least after he moves his foot, it looks like the fire's actually behind those rocks. And it's pretty good. It's pretty good. You can go through and adjust this however much you want, make it look perfect. But that's pretty good. A big obvious problem is we can still see these lights. You might have kind of been hoping that when we cover this with the fire, that we don't really need those lights anymore. And that's true with some things. Depending on what kind of element you're putting over something, you might totally not need to deal with this. But because this fire is see-through and because those lights are so bright, we're going to have to erase the lights so that we can put the fire in there instead of the lights. So how do we do that? Well, first thing let's do is just clean up our node graph a little bit. I'm going to get rid of this merge because I don't need that. And let's take the original footage and just bring it to the left again. And I'm going to drag it up here to our first viewer, just so we can see this without the fire or anything on it. So to erase these, we're going to use a paint node. So let's go ahead and just double click in the empty space here, and I'll hit Shift Spacebar and type PAINT. That's going to bring up paint, and I'll hit add. Now, what a paint node does is it lets you paint on whatever image that you plug into it. So let's go ahead and grab the output of this original footage and plug it into the paint. Now, this is really cool because we can take the output of a node and plug it into multiple things. And so this is still going to the tracker, but we're kind of taking a side diversion here and going into the paint node also. This is just a way to reuse the same media or the same node multiple different times within your node graph without copying and pasting things. So we're just taking that output, bringing it into the paint node, and let's drag the paint node into this left viewer. And what this does is if you go up here to the upper left, we have these tools. I can take this fourth one over and switch it to a paintbrush, and we can paint on it. And so it's kind of adjusting this image sort of like you would in like an image editing program or something. But we don't really want to just paint on this. What we're going to do is use this kind of like a little baby version of Photoshop, and we're going to clone out these lights to sort of erase them. So to do that, I'm going to pick my paintbrush up here, but over here under apply controls, I'm going to pick this second icon here, which is our clone. And that's going to let us clone out these things. So if we have our second icon picked here and our fourth icon over here, what we can do is hold Alt and pick a spot. That's going to add this little red X there. Might be kind of hard to see. There it is. And then we can kind of clone things onto this footage that way. So I'm going to go over here to my brush controls and take the size down and the softness up so that we have a smaller soft brush. And then I'm just going to take some time and grab a piece and then just kind of clone this. Now, this isn't going to look amazing. And the great news is we don't have to make it look amazing because this is going to be behind the fire. It just can't be this great big obvious problem that we have with these lights being so bright. So I'm just going to really terribly clone this out. Doesn't have to be good. It just has to be generally the color of what would be behind the fire. There we go. So now we have this looking a little better. This part looks terrible, but it's fine. We're going to take this opacity down of our apply controls to like 50. And we can take some of these other rocks and we can kind of just put this in there and kind of just move this around to be generally something that looks like it would be behind there. And honestly, it just doesn't have to be that good. Something like that, sure. Of course, the better job you do here, the better it will look, but spend your time doing things that matter a lot. This is going to be behind the fire, and it's probably going to be fine like this. We'll mess with it if it's not. So now that we have our clone finished, if we were to take this and play this back right now, it looks weird because it's actually taking that clone and it's kind of moving it around. It's not tracked like everything else would be. And so I'm going to go back to where we were here, which I think was frame 209. And we're actually going to make this a still frame before we even paint on it. I'll hit Shift Spacebar and type in time. And we're going to use that same time speed node and put this right before our paint. But we're going to set the speed to 0 and the delay to our current frame, which is 209, 209 like that, and say nearest. And that's going to give us a still frame on the left that we can clone and paint and all of that. Let's just make this slightly less horrible. Just kind of clean this up a little bit, just so it's not like obviously terrible. There we go. Great. And if you weren't recording a big long course that's already going to be really long, you can take some time and make that look really good, but that's going to be fine. So now we have this kind of background layer here for our fire pit that's going to go behind our actual fire. Let's take this and I'm going to merge this over our original footage. And we'll see when the fire's over it, you don't notice how terrible it is. Isn't that great? But remember, this is a still frame. And so we're putting this whole still frame over everything. And that's not what we're going to want. It's like not at all right. I'll just go back to our frame where we had it, 209, right there. And we're going to do kind of a similar thing to what we did with our mask, in that I'm going to mask this cloned layer here, and I'm just going to include it right here over our lights so that we kind of just have this little patch that we're sticking to it. And what I can do is just grab a polygon mask and attach that to the merge. And I'm just going to go over really kind of just where the lights are, like this. Good. And then we're going to soften that mask a little bit. So I'll just add a little soft edge to it. The softer you can make your masks, the less trouble you're going to have. So we're going to make this as soft as we can without it eating into the lights too much. Nice and soft, like this. And then we're going to take this polygon and again go to our inspector, and here under center, right click and say connect to and tell the track path position. And let's just grab this and put it back where it's supposed to be. Just putting that patch over those lights. Great. Good. I'm also going to right click here for shape animation and remove the polygon line, just so it stays in the same place and we're not animating that line any more than we need to. And now, here's what should happen. We should see some magic here. We're going to be putting a little patch here, and because it's already using this tracking information, it's going to move that patch around how it's supposed to be, which probably doesn't even need to be moved around that much, but it's going to move it how it's supposed to be. And as we play this back, it's going to kind of give us a little window to where we can see where we have kind of our background cloned over those lights. The only problem is that this background isn't moving along with anything either. So let's go ahead and let's do sort of a similar thing. I can either copy and paste this tracker. In fact, let's just go ahead and do that. I can copy this tracker and paste it, and we're going to use that instead of the merge. And I'm just holding shift to kind of move this in and out of the flow like that. And we'll plug this in just like we would with our merge. And let's make sure we go to operation, and here instead of linear dodge, we'll say normal, and that's going to put that patch over it. And check this out. Now it's going to move with our footage wherever it needs to be. And other than his foot coming in over the fire, which we'll deal with in a minute, we have kind of that background there. When we put the fire over it, and make sure that our mask still works here. We should have a good looking fireplace that doesn't have those distracting lights behind it. And now we're getting somewhere. One thing I'll say is that this little stick kind of coming across it looks worse than it needs to, so we can probably just take that out. Just going to select that and kind of do a general kind of rock formation here. That's probably going to look a little bit more natural. Kind of massage this and play around with it a little bit. Maybe make it a little bit softer. Now we have that fire kind of coming in from the other side of that rock. We could even do stuff like take different rocks and kind of place them in front of this fire if we wanted to, just to really kind of break it up. And it would just be a matter of connecting those to a tracker so that it kind of match moves with it. Okay, so this is having a little bit of a hard time playing this back because it has to think about that tracker all the time. So if it's having a hard time playing back, there's a couple things we can do. We can go to show page navigation, just go to the edit page. And again, this is going to be in the edit page instantly. We can go up to playback and make sure render cache smart is on. And then what it's going to do is kind of cache this clip when I'm not really doing anything in Resolve. And when this bar turns from red to blue, then I can play this back full speed, and it should be a little bit easier to see how things are going. One thing I'll double check is go to my project settings, and under master settings, kind of part of the way down here, make sure that we have our render cache format as DNxR HQX. That's probably just fine. And maybe we'll take this playback and set it to user. Then we'll right click and go to render cache fusion output, make sure that's on. And there we go. It's starting to think about it. There's the little blue bar. Perfect. So now we should be able to play this back full speed. As we play this back, we gotta just take a look and make sure that looks good. And I think that looks pretty good down here. This mask is maybe just a little bit sharp here. So we might want to do something to kind of break that up. Maybe we could put a rock in front of it or something, but you know, overall, you get the idea. It's something that probably nobody's going to notice too much or care about too much, but might be able to just adjust this mask a little bit. Actually, what we should do is take this patch that we're making, because that's kind of messing up the lighting a little bit. Take this patch and just take this back a little bit, because that's going to make this feel a lot better as far as the lighting goes. Maybe something more like that. So now, when we throw this fire in there, it's actually interacting with that light a little better. Maybe even soften it just a little more. Okay. And let's call that good enough for now. You can spend a lot of time on it. I spent quite a bit of time on this, getting this right for the actual movie, but let's move on to more interesting things. Another problem that we have is the cowboy's boot goes in front of our fake fire, which is a dead giveaway. We can't have that, so we need to have his boot in front of it. So this whole thing is honestly kind of a similar process. If we take our original footage here, we have his leg in front of that fire for quite a while, until probably frame 72 or something like that. And so for that amount of time, we need to basically cut out his leg and then put it on top of the fire, which you can do by rotoing it, which means making a mask and then animating the mask to perfectly fit this. So I'll give you just a quick idea of what that would look like. So that would be something like taking our original footage, and you can either drag another output like this, or you can even just copy and paste it if it's a little easier. It's the same thing, and put that over the fire. And then we could take a mask like this, plug it into the merge, and then draw a mask like this for his leg, and then animate that mask every frame. And what you'd want to do is kind of adjust it for all the major movements. So he kind of starts to move his leg back right here, but until then, like at frame 64 or something like that, we can move this around and kind of fit it to his leg a little better. And depending on how much he moves, this might not be that hard. If he's moving a lot, it might be really annoying. And we really only need to have this part that's in front of the fire be just right. This part doesn't matter at all. And so then we can go to the beginning of the shot and move it over and kind of roto it like this. And it takes a long time and it's really annoying. However, once you do it, and this might be fine, the idea is that you'll have this cutout of his leg that we put over the fire, and we can adjust this soft edge a little bit. Like that. And maybe a little more. And as we play this back, then it keeps that fire from behind his leg. And that might be plenty good for what we're doing. That's the nice thing about Roto, is even though it's a lot of work and it takes a long time, sometimes you only need to do a little bit of it, and it's just as easy to do kind of an okay job, and it's good enough, you know? The other thing that you could do is select this with Magic Mask, which if you have the paid version of Resolve, is really great, really great. So let me show you how Magic Mask works. So we have this original footage. I'll just bring this up here. We can run it through Magic Mask. I'm hitting Shift Spacebar and type Magic. And then we just color on what we want to cut out like this, and it will cut it out. We can hold Alt and color over what we don't want to cut out, and kind of get ourselves a good selection here of this leg. I'll switch this mode to better. Yeah, I'll switch it to faster. And then I'll go ahead and track this backwards. That's just going to cut out his whole leg for the entirety of this clip. I'll go back here and track this forwards. And right when he moves his leg, I'll go ahead and stop it because we don't really need it after that. And so now we have this cut out. And again, we can put this over our footage, and the magic mask, it kind of leaves these jaggies, but you can go over to matte right here in the inspector and push up the blur a little bit, and it's going to probably be just fine. And that is a lot less work than us rotoing it out, and it does about the same thing. So for stuff like little stuff like that, magic mask, so good. Now it's messed up here a little bit, so we'd have to go back and kind of refine it. The way that you do that with magic mask is you bring this in and you kind of go frame by frame with this tracking. And anytime that you see a problem like here, you want to hold Alt and kind of refine it like that. And then you have to track forward some more. So we're just going to keep tracking forward. There we go. Yes. So now that's going to refine that a little more. That's good. And that should be just fine for what we're doing. So now we have our leg in front of our fire. Baby. Okay. Let's go ahead and go to our edit page and let this think for a minute, and then we'll take a look at what else we need to do. Okay, so let's take a look at the shot. Looking good, looking good, looking good. And then, oh, that disappears. Now, why does that disappear? Well, what's actually happening is that our magic mask is messing this up. We've tracked our magic mask here, and we kind of stopped tracking right about here. And so it kind of thinks that we just want to select everything. So it's just putting the entire footage over itself again. So what we're going to do is just turn off our merge here that's bringing in our magic mask. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to hit the left bracket a few times here to where we still see everything. And right about there, just as soon as our leg is kind of clear of the fire, we're going to go ahead and just take the blend of this merge 3 down. The blend is like the opacity or the strength of any node. And for merge, it is the strength of the foreground being put over the background. So we're going to take this blend, and I'm going to go back to maybe here, frame 72, and add a keyframe to our blend, and then take this one frame to the right and turn the blend all the way down. Now, that's going to turn off our magic mask layer and everything. We can kind of see this if I'll just plug a background into this foreground here for magic mask. This is what our magic mask is doing. So we have our magic mask, and then it just turns it off, okay? Because we only need that little part. And now the rest of this will still be able to see the fire and everything. Great. Okay, let's let this cache and take a look. All right, let's take a look at this. Okay. I think that looks pretty good. So now we have fire. It's there. It doesn't look like there's lights. Seems like it's working. The only thing it's missing is smoke. Because you can't have fire without smoke. That's just scientific. That's just pure science. So let's go ahead and put the smoke on. This is going to be a little bit more straightforward. We're just going to go ahead and turn on that merge with our smoke. And this we can get away with quite a bit. We can probably just do a circle mask. And let's just bring this up like this and then feather the mask with a soft edge like that. And I doubt anybody's going to notice. Let's just go ahead and bring this black background here so we can see what we're doing. Take this mask, move it up so that it just kind of fades in here, that we don't want that sharp edge right here. We just want to bring this up enough to where it's kind of fading in. Great. Take that background off. There we go. And now we have smoke, and it's probably going to be just fine like that. Now, one thing is that the smoke is in front of these guys, which you could probably make the argument that this arm, at least, should be in front of the smoke. Depends on how much you care. We also want the smoke to go a little faster, I think. So we're going to just take that same time speed, copy and paste it here, just so that it's going a little bit faster. And I think that's going to work fine. So now we have that smoke coming up from the fire. and let's just see how it looks. Again, I'll switch over to the edit page and let that cache. All right. So now we have the fire and the smoke. And I mean, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. We could certainly take the time and either roto or magic mask out these guys and kind of put them in front of the smoke if we want to. That would be pretty much exactly how we did it with the leg. But I don't know if I mind it too much that the smoke's in front of them. I don't think it's that big a deal. One thing I might do is just turn the opacity of the smoke down a little bit. Let's take this smoke, take the merge, and take the blend down just a little. We want it to be almost where you just feel the smoke rather than see it. We want there to be smoke, but it doesn't have to be like super opaque. Okay. Now we have the smoke that's turned down a little bit, a little less obvious. Feels pretty good. All right. It's a realistic campfire. Okay, so we're in a good place. We have our campfire looking pretty good. And now we're going to do a similar thing to this shot right here. So what we could do is actually we can go into Fusion and open up the clips up here. And that's going to show us a clip sort of like we have in the color page. And that'll quickly let us just jump in between these clips. So I'm going to go ahead and let's just grab the fire and the smoke right here. I'll just hold Control and select both of these because we're going to have to rebuild most of this, but we can have the fire and the smoke be the same size. So I'll select those and hit Control C just to copy it. And then I'll go over to 31 here, double click here and hit Control V. So now we have our fire and our smoke in there, and I'll go ahead and close our clips. The one thing that's probably a thing, let's go to keyframes. We just want to make sure that the time is lined up here. And it looks like the smoke, we have time there, and the fire, let's move that over and make sure that kind of starts at 0. We're near 0. Same thing for smoke. Okay. So now if we put these over our clip, we should roughly have them about where they're supposed to be. Let's take this merge and turn this to screen. Let's actually copy the ellipse mask too. Control C. Go over here and Control V and plug that in there. And that's going to do what we want. Okay. So now let's just go ahead and kind of do the same thing that we were doing. This is a little bit shorter of a shot and there's a little bit less problems as far as moving around and everything. We just have his leg here. So we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to go a little bit faster now. Let's take this media in and we're going to use our paint node. Plug this into the paint node. This will be kind of a nice review. I'm going to move this to a place where we see a little bit more of the fire, or at least, I don't know, it's all about the same. So we'll just kind of start here-ish. So that's at frame 66, and let's do a time speed here before the paint. I'm just holding shift to drag this in. So frame 66, so we'll say speed 0, delay 66, interpolation mode nearest. Okay. So here on frame 66, we're going to do our paint out here. So again, with the paint node selected, I'll go up and get the single paintbrush, and then down here, this second icon, I'll take the softness up, the size down. There we go. I'll just zoom in here and we'll try our best. Just going to kind of pick a place here and just go over it. Okay. This here too. And we're just kind of covering up these lights. Okay, something like that. Just whatever it is, just not bright white. Okay. We can cut into his pants a little bit here. It's actually probably a good idea because we want this to have plenty of room. So that looks pretty bad, but we're going to put fire over it, so it's fine. Okay. And we're going to merge this over like this, but we're only going to do it inside of this mask, which is going to end right about meow. Boom. Something like that. Great. Okay, so there's our still. we're going to have to track this. So I'm going to grab a tracker. And let's put this here. We're going to use this as the merge actually in a minute. But let's just track this, and we're going to go ahead and track the lights. But there is a part where this light moves, it kind of falls down. So we're going to make sure not to track this one. So we're going to go ahead and track this part right here, which I think is going to be fine the whole time. Looks like it. So let's just find our tracker, which is up here. We're going to drag this down. Let's go ahead and put this on the lower corner of that light. You could probably pick any of those corners, but that'll work. And we'll just track it backwards since we're at the end, like this. Trickety track. Okay. We'll switch this operation mode to match move, and we'll put this paint into the tracker and the polygon onto the tracker for the mask, like this. Bring that tracker up like that. And here at frame 66, it should look beautiful. I'm going to soften that edge a little bit. It looks like that kind of moved. So we'll grab a transform and put that after the paint. And then we'll just kind of move this over to line up perfectly. I'm just holding control so that I can move this a little bit more gingerly. Yeah, something like that. So we're just moving that over with that transform. We're going to take this polygon and go to the center, right click the center and go to connect to tracker and telepath position. Boom. And we'll have to move this back up into the right position like this, but it should work out. Get rid of those lights. You can select all of these and then hold S and click and drag to kind of scale this. That should work fine. Now, if we play this back, other than it being a really sucky job doing the clone, it should stick to it and not be obviously a giveaway. Okay, that works. Let's go ahead and copy and paste this tracker and put our fire into that using that tracker. Let's see what that's doing here. Let's take this transform and move this up a little bit. Okay, we're going to take our polygon mask, make a new mask for the tracker, for our flames. Let's go ahead and just connect this center to the tracker and telepath again, which is going to be this same tracker 1 and teletrack 1 path. It's going to be the same thing as the other one. There we go. And now we should be able to draw on this. We'll go ahead and make a mask here around this rock like this and hit invert. And that should stick because it's already on the tracker. Good. And we'll make the soft edge a little bit soft like that. Let's see how that works. It's working pretty good. So that keeps it away from the front rocks here. We'll take this tracker and make sure our operation is apply mode linear dodge. We're going to take our leg and do some roto on our leg also, which again, I'll probably just do magic mask. And again, you can take this same original footage and copy and paste it up here, or you can take the output of it and just put it into magic mask either way. Then we'll merge that over. Let's see what magic mask is looking at here. And we'll just select magic mask and draw on what we want to select. And that should give us a rough outline. Something like that will work. And I'll go ahead and track this back and forth. And this we will actually need to track the whole time. So definitely quicker to do magic mask than to do a roto. Although, I mean, it's pretty steady. So you could probably just about do a roto on it and trace it out yourself and animate that mask without tons of work. And the fire, because it kind of has a glow, is going to be relatively forgiving, but that's okay. Let's say matte, and we're going to blur it just a little bit. Let's see what this looks like. Yeah. So we have a little bit of glow there, but we have that in front. So here's the difference. Here's what we would have had. Here's what we have now. Okay, so now we have him in front of the fire. Let's see what this looks like. Oh, baby. That looks pretty good. Okay, great. Smoke, we're going to put here. I'm going to, again, probably just have that kind of fade up this way. Now it's over his leg, which I don't know if anybody'd ever care or mind, but yeah, we probably should. We should just put this behind the leg roto. So let's just go ahead and I'm going to select this and hold shift. And I can grab this out like this and just drag it back in like that. Then we need to reconnect our original like that. And then we'll make sure we're looking at our final product here. So now the smoke is actually coming in from under his foot. So now if we turn off the foot, we have the fire and the smoke under it this time. Okay, so now that looks pretty good. The only thing I'd say is the smoke is kind of coming from this side more. So let's take a look at that. Let's just get our transform here. We didn't actually position this, so that would probably be why. So let's make sure that this is up like this and over a little bit. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, there's the smoke. That's cool. Let's take that down a little bit. Take that down to like half strength. Now we have the fire and the smoke. That's looking pretty good. Okay, again, let's look at this here in the edit page just so we can play this back nicely. We don't have any problems. Okay. All right, as far as the fire goes, that looks pretty good. You can play this back and forth and really make sure it looks good. Just looking for problems. I think it looks pretty sweet. So on that side of things, everything's good. Now, what's different about this is that we are going to be adding some muzzle flashes and some gun smoke from this. So what I'd like to do is let's kind of start mocking that up. But one thing that we're going to need to know is when they shoot. Depending on how you did things, this may or may not be a little bit easier, but we already have our audio here. And so if we have our audio that's timed to our video, we zoomed in and figured out when they would be hitting the trigger and everything and when there should be gunshots. And we just put the gunshot sounds there. And so what I'm going to do is every time there's a gunshot, which I believe is right here, there is one gunshot, which is this bigger waveform, and then the other gunshot, which is this little waveform. Now, which one is it? Who shoots first? The first one to shoot is probably this guy, I think. And then, so what we're going to do is select this clip and then hit M on the keyboard to add a marker for every gunshot. So actually, I'm going to do every big gunshot first. So every shot on the left, these are going to be blue. And just right at the start of each of those. And there should be 6 shots because we care about realism here. Okay, so there should be 6 blue shots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep. Then I'm going to switch my marker to red, let's say. And we're going to put in those shots. This one should be blue. Boop. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Reds. I think there's actually one. I think there's another one here too. Looks like it. Okay. So now we have 6 shots from each gun, exactly where we want them. And what's cool is when we go into Fusion and we open up our keyframes, we'll be able to, in the media in, see these markers. Oh, baby. So now we can figure out exactly when we want these shots to happen. So let's go ahead and start at the beginning. We have a blue one. That's from this guy right here. So right here, we're going to have a couple things happen. Muzzle flash, and then it's the smoke from the gun. So let's go to Action VFX, and we're going to go to Colt 45 side, and we're just going to use this one asset here, which, if we zoom out, this is a video file. And it has a couple of frames like this. So this is a real muzzle flash, which is cool. So if we were doing kind of a slow motion thing, this would be cool, but we're actually just going to use this one frame because this is going to be so quick. It's just going to be flash on, one frame, flash off like that. And so I'm going to go ahead and just right here for this media in2, we'll call this flash like this, flash underscore MI. So for flash MI, we're going to move this down to frame 3. And our global in and out up here in our inspector, I'm going to take this all the way down to 3 as well. So it's just one frame. And what should happen is here on frame 3, if I go over with my brackets, 1, 2, 3, that should be on for one frame and then off. Okay, so that's good. And now we're going to take this and merge it over everything else. And here at frame 3, we should see this here. Okay, for our merge, we want to make sure that we take this alpha gain down. That's going to look at that difference here. Look at this difference. So this is keyed already. That means that the black is removed, but we still kind of have this like black around it. But if we take this alpha gain down, look at that. It goes like from fake to real. So we definitely want it to be real looking. Okay, there's our muzzle flash. I'll go ahead and close our page navigation here. And we're going to take a transform. So I'll just type XF in the select tool. And just to make things easier, I'm going to change the pivot of this transform. That's like where it rotates from. So I can push this pivot over and you can barely see it, but there's this little green overlay, this little X, and I can move this around and I'm going to put this right at the base of that muzzle flash. So now when I rotate this, I can rotate it like this and it'll scale around that. Oh, it's so good. So now I can take the center of this and just move it over to the edge of the muzzle and rotate this. And now he has a giant flamethrower. That's maybe just a little big. It's as big as a person. So maybe not quite so big, but we'll take the size down to something reasonable. Now, realistically, realism, maybe it's that big, something like that. But we're going to make this a lot bigger because it looks cool. So we're going to make it slightly bigger than normal. Some people have argued that it's bigger than this. I don't know. It depends on who you ask. But if it's about as long as the barrel, I'd say that's probably about right. So what we're going to do is just have this flash on, just boop, when he shoots, just like that. Boom, just like that. And it looks pretty good. The thing that really sells it is the gun smoke. So I'm going to grab a gun smoke here and let's just take a look at this. This is just a little puff of smoke like that. Boom, like that. Very nice. Cool. Let's look at this one. There's another gun smoke here. Yeah, that's cool. I like both of those. So now let's take the gun smoke and we're going to put that over and kind of do basically the same thing. But again, we got to kind of line it up in time. So at 3, we want this to be there. And let's actually rename this. We'll call this gun smoke 1 underscore MI. And this is getting a little bit crazy. And so what I like to do with my keyframes panel is these 3 dots here. Click on these 3 dots and go to show only selected tools. And that's going to clean everything up a little bit. Very nice. So it's only going to show us what we have selected. And I can kind of move this back and forth to figure out exactly where I want this to be, something like that. Again, I'm going to set this merge apply mode to screen. And let's also get a transform here and set that pivot. We're going to put that again, kind of where it comes from. Okay. And then we can rotate it. And we can move the center to right at the end of the barrel. And then we can size it like this. So let's see what that looks like. Boom. Now we have this gun smoke. Let's go ahead and just turn off the rest of our stuff here because it'll play back a little better. And we also can focus just on this gun smoke. So I'm going to select all of these and hit Control P. Control P to enable and disable these merge nodes. And let's go through here. So that's like kind of crazy. It looks cool. I think it's about right. It might need to be sped up, but I don't know. I feel like it's okay. Sometimes you get things flickering a little bit. That's just a thing with Fusion. It won't actually render flickering like that, like this. That's just Fusion being weird. But this, I'd say let's go ahead and size this down a little bit. And we don't really need to move this along with the gun because that, if you think about it, if it shoots out that smoke, it's going to stay where it is no matter what the gun's doing. So it's just going to shoot out that one time. So let's just see how that looks. That looks cool. But we don't want this to start before the gun. We actually want this to be there right after the gunshot. And so we could grab this gun smoke and very carefully trim this edge. Now I'm not moving this forward in time. I'm actually trimming the edge, like making an edit on the edge. So I'm not grabbing this with this icon. I'm grabbing it here with this little bracket icon, and that'll trim it just like you do on the edit page. So now it's setting the in to be right there. Another way you can do this is just grab the trim up here and just move this a couple frames in. So we'll do it to like 4 and then just bring it this way. So now we have this coming in and you see that smoke coming out. Now we got to kind of adjust where this smoke is coming from. Boom. Yeah, that's cool. We're probably going to turn this down a little bit. So we'll take the blend down a lot, something like that. And now we should have a good looking, one single good looking shot like that. Boom, boom, boom. Cool. And depending on how much the camera is moving, we might need to track this just with the movement of the camera. Again, we don't need to worry about the movement of his gun, but with the movement of the camera, I don't know. Probably don't need to. It's probably not going to be that big a deal. So that's how you would kind of do that in Fusion. And depending on how detailed you want to get, you might want to add some lighting and all kinds of stuff here in Fusion. With this, we're just going to kind of throw this on here. And so because we're not doing any tracking and we're not really animating stuff a whole lot, it might be a little bit easier just to do this in the edit page, which I don't think there's really any reason not to. And so we're going to kind of do the same idea, but in the edit page. So I'll just take off these merges. I'll leave this here for now. This might just be a little bit easier in the edit page. Let's go to our workspace, show page navigation, and just go to edit. And here we can do basically the same thing. We'll take this Colt thing here, and we're just going to use one frame of it. So I'm just going to go over one frame and then hit Control / to cut that. So now we have that one frame. Okay. And I'll go ahead and enable my transform modes here. And we'll just rotate this and position it to be right at the end of our gun. Why not? Let's take the easy route, huh? Okay, there we go. Sure, that's pretty big, but it's fine. And then let's go ahead and take this inspector, and here under composite, again, we're just going to go to add. Okay. And maybe we'll take the opacity down a touch. Just a little. The only thing about doing it this way is, depending on our color grade, we might need to adjust this later or do a compound clip first or something, but it's probably going to be fine. And so I'm going to hit Alt and just copy this over here to this way. And again, we'll just move this around to where it's supposed to be and just place these, man. That's the thing, is Fusion is really, really good for this kind of thing, but if it's simple enough, you can do it in the edit page, and it's actually just a little bit easier to do this on the timeline, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's however you want to do it. So we'll just copy and paste these each time. Let's do one more. I'm just holding Alt and dragging to make this copy. Same thing here. We're just lining that up with that gun. Okay, so now we have, cool, that works. And again, what sells this is the gun smoke. So we'll take this smoke, we'll scale it down. We'll just fade it out too here on the edit page. And we'll wait until the smoke is a little bit bigger, and that's where we'll kind of cut it in like this. Then I'm going to turn this and flip it. We want this right after our gun. Cool. Make this a little bigger, I think. Cool. So there's one. And I'm going to go ahead and just skip the next one just so it doesn't look like exactly the same each time. We'll just fade each of these out the best we can. Cool. And I'm going to use a different gun smoke to kind of just mix things up a little bit. Again, we're going to change this and flip it to be just right. Cut it in a couple frames, and we'll have this start right after the gunshot. Okay, have this fade out. Just move this around to be just right. So we'll do it again here. Make sure these are fading out. And we'll just change them each time a little bit. We'll just have those all fade out as much as we can. Go ahead and copy this and bring this up a bit. There we go. And we'll have this all end right before this cut. Right at that cut. So now we have it. All those happening. They're maybe a little bit strong. So let's take all of these and just take the opacity down to like 50. Yeah, much better. This one's too strong. Let's take that down a lot. Great. Cool. Awesome. And now when we combine this with the work that we've done in Fusion, just go ahead and turn these back on, Control P. I'll wait for this to think. And we have a pretty cool effect. Looks pretty good. So we're gonna do the same thing for his gun, for the other guy's gun. I'm just gonna take this same muzzle flash, and I'll just drag this up here to a new track. And again, we'll just put that at after each red mark. Just alt dragging these to copy them. Okay, great. And we're gonna do a similar thing with our smoke too. So I'll just rough that in. Let's take this smoke, but we're going to flip it. We'll position this all here in a second, but I'll just alt drag all of these. I'll take this other smoke, put that up here, like that. So now we have 6 sides. I'll go ahead and not flip those either. And now we can just go in and adjust the position of all of these. I'll grab my overlay here. Let's just go ahead and flip these. Okay, we'll put this here. We'll make this maybe a little smaller. Okay. Same thing for this one. Flip it, rotate it. This one, he's just shooting way up in the air. Right? Like he can't shoot anything. And then this one, flip it, size it, put it where it's supposed to be. Great. I think I actually did the wrong one on the wrong side. Ah! That won't be a problem for you though. So we're gonna go ahead and speed through this and I'll fix everything. Okay, I think I have everything in there. Okay, so this looks pretty good. I think I'm really happy with it. So the only other thing with these 2 shots is we got to remove this van, this little buddy in the background. Again, probably no one's ever going to notice it. You could probably leave it in and it would be fine. But, you know, let's be let's try it out. So let's go ahead and start with this shot. I'm just going to go to Fusion. I'm going to go and make sure I'm not over one of my other shots here. And let's go to Fusion, just like this. We're going to do kind of a similar thing that we did to the campfire, in that we're going to have a paint node and a transform and a tracker and everything like that. The first thing let's do is track this. So I'm going to click off of this, hit Shift Spacebar and type TRACK. And we're going to go ahead and plug this tracker in. I'm just holding Shift to go there. And let's kind of move this over just so we have some room. And this tracker, I'm going to select that. And then we're going to take this IntelliTrack and we're going to put this right over our little van here. Plug it in somewhere like that. And then we'll track this back and forth. And that's going to just look at that pattern and try and find it every frame. Let's take our paint node and plug this in. And we could do kind of the same thing. So we could get our time speed, plug this in, and make sure that we have a still frame. So let's just say still frame at 0. So speed at 0, delay at 0, interpolation mode nearest. Then we can bring our paint up like this and grab our clone brush. And this time we'll do a little better job. Not a lot better, but a little better job of covering this up so that it doesn't look like there's just a van sitting there. Okay, that's good. The nice thing is this is all kind of blurry and it's very easy to clone out. Then we take this and we plug this into the tracker like that. And we do a mask into the tracker. And we just put a patch over this. I'm going to set this tracker operation to match move. And there we go. And now we have that covered up, sort of. The only problem is we have to connect our polygon mask center to our track, connect to, this is going to be tracker 2 IntelliTrack path position. And we'll grab this and grab this patch and put it back over like that. Something like this. Make sure we soften the edge a little bit. And now we have that patch being put over. We have a little bit of weirdness at the beginning, which might be just a mask thing. Let's try that. Ooh. That's from our paint node, so that's interesting. One thing we could do is just put this time speed after our paint node, and that's going to make sure that we get the exact same result. Put this over like this. Take our paint mode and just kind of soften this a little bit, just so it's harder to see that transition. There we go. And now we get a really solid patch there, and we're getting rid of that. Yeah, that works. Okay. Okay, so now we've erased our van from the back, and we're just going to put that all before everything that we've done. Let's do a similar thing to our other shot real quick. Here for our end shot, let's go back to Fusion, and we're going to do basically the same thing. Tracker, plug that in like this. Time speed, paint. Let's just do paint and then time speed, I guess. And we'll go ahead and just start with the first frame, frame 0. First thing let's actually do is just track this. So I'm going to grab this tracker, throw it in there, and let it track. And his hand almost goes over it, but not quite. We got lucky this time, or else we'd have to do some fanciness. Okay, there's our tracker. Operation mode is going to be match move. But first let's paint this out. Just going to grab the paint node and go to frame 0. Grab our paintbrush, push up our softness, make sure our apply mode is there. Our size, let's take our size down a little bit, and our softness up. And we're just going to erase this out That works. Add a little bit more shadow there. Okay, great. Time speed, we're going to say speed 0, delay 0, interpolation mode nearest. Plug this into the tracker. And then we're going to have a little patch here that we'll plug into our tracker. We'll just select that like that. Go to our center for our mask, right click, connect to, tracker to track 1 path position. And bring this back down where we wanted. Like that. Make sure for our mask we have a nice soft edge. Something like that. And that should work. Make sure that his hand doesn't go over it. Looks like we got lucky. We got lucky, kids. Let's go to edit. Let this cache and make sure that it looks beautiful. Okay, let's take a look. We're looking if there's anything weird here. Looks good to me. Amazing. Okay, so our main VFX, like our big shots, are finished. This is wonderful. The other thing that we really need to add, the big thing for everything else, is we need to add this smoke to these other shots. Now, if you were paying attention when we were adding the gunshot effects, really, we can do this almost the same way here in the edit page, and it's just a lot less work than going into Fusion for this. Because really, if we're just putting one layer over another with a transfer mode, there's no reason not to do that in the edit page unless you have to track it or have it move or something. But if you don't, which a lot of these are, they are moving a little bit, but it's so little and the smoke is so kind of wispy that you won't ever be able to tell. And so we can do stuff like, okay, we have this guy, but we need some smoke over here. We can take this same small rising smoke and just put this over our shot like this, and then we'll zoom it up. We'll turn the composite mode to screen. There we go. And we can just move this over like this. And
The thing that's certain is that one of us is going to be walking away with that money.
that looks pretty good. The one thing I might do is zoom this in even more and just kind of move this over to the side and then just take the opacity down. So we just, again, we want it to be pretty subtle. We don't want people to be like, there's smoke there. We want to be like, oh yeah, it makes sense that there would be a little bit of smoke, right?
The only thing that's certain
So just a little bit of smoke.
one of us is going to be walking away with that money.
There we go.
The only thing that's certain is that one of us is going to be walking away with it.
And if you wanted to, you could keyframe the position of this to kind of work with this dolly. And so we could move this position. Let's see, what would it be? If the background's moving from right to left, this would be moving left to right. So we could take that position over to the right some more. So we have a little bit of parallax, but again, you're probably never going to notice. Just because the smoke's changing so much, you just won't even notice if that's a problem. Great. And so we basically just do that for these single shots here. So this shot, I'm going to take the same thing and I'll just bring this to a new track like this and then trim it. And then here we'll take this smoke and flip it. We'll just turn this up so we can see what we're doing. And we're going to put this like right here. Oh, I have my position still a thing. So let's just reset the position. Let's just reset all of that. I'm just going to move this over here. So there's our smoke on the left. It's maybe just a little bit too, like there's like billows coming out. So I might just zoom this in a lot just so we get just some general kind of mist almost. Maybe we'll even use a different part of this clip. So I can hit T and grab the top part of this and just kind of use a different part of the clip. Yeah, something like that. And we'll just maybe move it over still and turn it down just so we barely see it. Feels like smoke on the side. That's good. And I'll go ahead and just right click and say clip color, I don't know, yellow for this one. And then this one will be a different color. So green, sure, lime. So now I want a lime clip like this over each shot that's similar. So this kind of thing, I can hit T and just grab the upper part and use a different part of this, just so it's not the exact same thing over and over again. And we'll go through and do that again for each one. So we'll go ahead and speed through me doing that. So that looks good. All of the close-ups probably don't need smoke, but these over-the-shoulder shots do. Now, the problem with the over-the-shoulder shots is if I were to take kind of a similar thing like this rising smoke here, we'll just reset all of this. If I were to take this and kind of zoom it in like this so that we could see that smoke, then yes, it works, but it goes right in front of his hat, which is a dead giveaway, right? So we would be doing something like rotoing his hat for each of these shots, which you could totally do depending on how much smoke you want behind his hat. But because this smoke is so subtle, we probably don't need to go quite that crazy. We can probably just do a soft mask here and it would be fine. So what I'm going to do is do a little trick. Let's go to the effects panel, and here under effects, there's one called adjustment clip. I can use this adjustment clip, and what that's going to do is affect everything below it. It's like an overlay thing. And what we should do is I'll just get rid of this small rising smoke and go to this adjustment clip and go into Fusion. This is going to use this same video as a background for me, but it's not actually applying it to the video. So what I can do is take this small rising smoke and have it go over with a screen mode and set this up basically how we would on the edit page, right? I'll zoom this in a little more, something like that. And kind of get that set up. We'll take this blend down like halfway, right? So we have basically what we would have had, but with the smoke going over his hat like this, that's still a problem. But what we could do is take a mask. I'll just take a polygon mask and plug this into the merge right here. And I'm just going to do a really soft mask kind of around here and then invert it and make it really soft. So now let's turn this blend back up. And I'll even just color correct this smoke to be a little bit brighter so we can really see it. Now, we can adjust this polygon mask to pretty much fade the smoke out by the time it gets over to his hat. And now, even with this turned up way high, I mean, it's really hard to tell that there's a mask here. It's okay. So now we can take this brightness and contrast off, and we have that smoke, and we don't have it over his hat. Now, why did I do a soft mask instead of just doing a roto for his hat or something like that? Well, because we can take this adjustment clip that we made, and we can put this over any clip that we need. So I can hold Alt and just drag this over and trim it, and now we have the same kind of thing. And we can do kind of like what we were doing with our overlay of our smoke, and we can adjust our mask as needed if we want to, or for a lot of these, it might be just fine. So this, it's over his hat. I can go into Fusion and just quickly adjust this mask, or even just move this smoke over a little bit. There we go. We have that mask and it's working. It's not over his hat. It is a little bit right there. Oh, again, it got us. For this polygon mask, we're going to make sure that we set it and then right click and remove that polygon polyline so that it doesn't animate. We just want it to stay there. That's why it was having trouble. Great. And that one actually might be better for this clip too, so we can just Alt drag to copy this over. Take this adjustment clip again. Okay, something like that. So we have that smoke, but it's not in front of his hat. Great. And anything with this angle, we're pretty much going to do the same thing. Alt dragging it. Okay, great. This one works. Great. This one works. Okay. Is there any other over the shoulder shots? Nope. Okay. Then we're going to do the other side. I'll just take this up a track so that we know that it's the other side. Go into this adjustment clip in Fusion, and we'll take this media and we'll just flip it. Again, we should probably do this in a transform, but that's okay. I'm already in it. And we'll just go ahead and draw a new polygon mask here to kind of keep it off of him. Okay. And we'll go ahead and move this smoke over to be where it's supposed to be. So now we have that smoke coming up, and we don't have it in front of his hat. We do a little bit actually. So we're going to take this over like that. Here we go. And it's kind of a cheap trick here. I mean, if you look really closely, you could probably be like, hey, wait a minute, there's no smoke right here. Likely nobody's ever going to notice. Again, this is really subtle stuff. So again, copy and paste this adjustment clip. Same kind of thing that almost works, but we got to adjust that mask real quick. And I'll just bring this mask over a little bit and also select the merge and just bring the smoke over a little bit. Maybe could even make it smaller. Yeah, that works. Okay, couple more clips. Now we have that smoke in each clip, and it feels good. We can take all of these adjustment clips even. We can take all of those and group adjust the opacity. If we think it's too strong, we can take it down a little bit. So I might take it down to like 70, 80% on all of these. So you can just barely feel that there's smoke there. Just so it doesn't feel weird that there's smoke in this shot. We have smoke in all the shots. There we go. Awesome. So we really have a huge mix of different techniques here, from doing manual rotoscoping and tracing things out and animating things to even just throwing stuff over in the edit page. There are so many different cool ways to do VFX in Fusion, and this is really just the starting point. This is just the beginning. The powerful things that you can do in Fusion are just limitless. So if you haven't, I want to make sure that you get this footage. You can download the footage, make your own edits. We have all the unedited footage and audio for you to practice actually editing, as well as the high quality render of each of the clips in our locked edit. So you can practice visual effects and color grading with some high quality, actually log ungraded footage. Again, that's totally free. There's a link right here to get that, or in the description below. And if you want to learn more about Fusion, take the next step and get a little bit more advanced, we have all kinds of courses that we're constantly coming out with at groundcontrol.film. If you stayed all the way to the end, let me know in the comments, okay? I think it's really cool that you did that. And I like you a lot. Bye.